Welcome to another deep dive edition of the Chicks on the Right podcast. We are thrilled today to be joined by all the fellas from the Ruthless podcast. We were guests of theirs several weeks ago and had just the best time and wanted to absolutely return the favor. So we're glad to have the fellas with us. And I thought a way to kick off our conversation today, because I know we're going to talk about a lot of things, but for those people in our audience who may not know or be new to you fellas, could you talk a little bit about how you all began and why you refer to your show as The Program?
Well, how dare anyone not be familiar with this, ladies? How dare they? Listen, thanks for the hospitality. We really loved having you guys on when you were on our show. I think we had a good time and good enough where we didn't offend you, where you wouldn't return the favor. So here we are. Listen, The Program, it's probably a downstream effect of all of our sort of idiosyncrasies, oddities, and otherwise weirdness that we just can't call it a program. Part of it is our affectations. We're over-indexed on Midwesterners here on The Program.
Love it.
And truth be told, I'm not even sure how it is that it started, but I know we did a lot of variety.
Yeah, I thought program came from trying to mimic like the Southern genteel senator sound of the program. The program. Yes, the program, yes, the esteemed program. That's what I mean. I don't know. Some of it's just apocryphal. I don't know how we come up with these things, but we stick with them. And the lore of the program is rather deep at this point. You need like a decoder ring to get all the jokes. I mean, people appreciate it. Some people don't, but
we should put together like a glossary.
Yeah, no, right.
We call ours a Chictionary.
Yeah,
Good idea.
Well, we do.
So you guys get it.
Yeah.
14 years of like inside jokes that we have to and then everybody is in on the inside jokes. So we totally get that. The program.
The whole show, I feel like the whole show is basically just, our lunchtime conversation. And we kind of got this whole thing started during COVID. We would do like a regular sort of 5 p.m. Zoom from our homes, and after a while of sitting around and joking and having a few pops, we were like, this might actually make for a good podcast. And so here we are 3 years later.
It's a lunchtime conversation if your lunchtime includes like 3 tip toppers of bourbon.
Yeah,
that's
and also, to be fair, it wasn't just really hanging out on Zoom. It was betting on horses while drinking bourbon. To be completely honest and fair.
Yeah. Well, transparency is a hallmark of the variety program.
100%.
That's right.
So I mean, we had a great time. We had a great conversation, and like Duncan said, we said, why don't we actually just hit record and see how this goes? And of course, it started off as a mess for a few episodes,
and we've regretted it ever since.
I love it. It's so funny. We're kind of kindred in that sense, because that's it. In essence, that's kind of how we started. It wasn't a podcast, but that's kind of how we started our website. Is we just went to lunch and talked every day. So it's really interesting how it's very similar to how we started. Only yours obviously was different through COVID. It was just a couple years ago, and it was over lunch, just having drinks, hanging out, talking about politics, and it's very similar, don't you think?
Oh yeah,
Mark?
I mean, and I'm assuming you guys were talking on your Zoom calls during COVID because you are friends aside from podcasters and wanted a way to stay connected.
Hey, do you see the spot right here? Do you
No.
see it? It's right there.
No, I don't see anything.
It's not here, and it's not here.
It's not so much here or
but
here.
it was here, and you
Yeah, I
know why
don't
you
see
can't
anything.
see it? Because Jen, you saw dark spot corrector. That's why. That's why you can't see it, because it makes it poof disappear.
And
It
did
just
you use the
disappears.
3-minute luxury system of dark spot removal?
You know what? I didn't, but I will. I totally
Yeah.
will. I totally
Well,
will.
they've refined it.
Oh my God!
I know.
How can they refine perfection? How can they do that?
The question, right? Because you used the product that is dark spot, their GenuCell dark spot corrector,
just on its own.
Yeah, you used it on its own, and your spot is gone. Well, now they've enhanced the whole system into a 3-minute, 3-product system, which will make it go away even faster. So next time you get one of those spots, now you have like the most amazing 3-step luxury system process. You use the crystals, which is the microdermabrasion, which is the yummy smelling stuff, right? So that exfoliates. Then you put on the dark spot corrector, and then you follow that up with the XV cream.
So it's basically a magic wand. It's a magic wand.
It's like poof,
poof.
It's like ping, and then it's gone. It's amazing.
Poof and ping. It's poof and ping, you guys. That's what it is.
It really is. And so this is all 3 of those products, by the way, are in the most popular package right now, which is 70% off while their supplies last, only at genucell.com/chicks. That's GENUCEL.com/chicks. And then you're going to get your 70% off, those 3 products included, and any dark spot or liver spot or age spot or sunspot that you might be dealing with. Ping.
Gone. Ping and poof.
Gone.
Poof and ping. Gone. Gonzo. Get it?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, we sort of work in and around each other. Smug and I met hilariously over the internet, as one does in this day and age.
Yeah. So we basically would occasionally talk. We were like-minded on Twitter, as conservatives are, and I would host these off-the-record happy hours when I would come through DC. And I invite Holmes to one of these, and instantly we hit it off. He was just as funny in person. You never know when you meet someone from the internet if it's like, oh, okay. They were actually dangerous psychopaths, which I'm sure you had the same idea.
Oh, I was like, dude, this guy's.
I bet he's a dangerous psychopath in person. And unfortunately for both of us, neither were.
No, I was going to say all of our fears were confirmed.
And the rest of us have worked. John and Duncan, we've worked together for 15 years. So we all kind of like do the same, and that's an offshoot of Ruthless. When talking politics, like we don't in our sort of social life just sit around and be like, well, let's talk about the ins and the outs of the Republican Party and let's get that. Like that's not really us, but our jobs put us in the center of that, and so we have opinions on those things. And then I think Ruthless is sort of an outgrowth of that, of politics being the cornerstone of what it is that we're talking about. But then, like you guys, it extends far beyond that into culture and into sports and just
animal fighting,
which is
Absolutely.
now what we're known for,
right?
Is animal fighting.
Yeah.
And see,
Number
we're
one
known
animal
for
fighting.
screaming huskies, so it's all the same.
Yes.
There you go.
Totally. The screaming huskies. Mm-hmm.
Got
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. And dunking on the Kardashians. We have to dunk on them all the time.
Nobody's
Without
done better
question.
with less
Yes.
than the Kardashians.
Oh
I'll
my
tell you
God.
that.
Absolutely. They are going to be the cause for the demise of Western civilization.
They're trying their
for
darndest.
sure.
They are.
Yeah.
That and the show The Bachelor. The Bachelor, I felt like that in and of itself was symptomatic of Rome falling. Like that was.
Is it
that was
still
the
on?
end of
Tell
it.
me it's not still on.
The Bachelor?
I'm
Is
sure
that still
it is.
happening? It's not.
I thought they
don't
have like a
cancel shitty
geriatric
shows
one
these
now,
days.
don't they?
Right.
They don't.
It's
They don't
like
cancel
firing Congress people. It's like firing Congress people. The Bachelor still is like a cockroach. It's still on. It's going to live forever.
They're doing a
If you told me-
geriatric version now.
Oh my!
Wait,
Yeah, I just read that they've got like some, I don't know, like widow, like some 60, 70-year-old widow that's going to be the next Bachelor.
And the
will
winner
not die.
becomes president of the United States. I've seen it. It's not right.
He has to be at least 80 to run. Yeah, exactly.
Right, there is a minimum.
There is.
So you guys are,
Totally.
I mean, since you're so entrenched in DC, I'm assuming that sometimes you get accusations of being in a bubble and that you don't understand the real people out here in the real world. So what is it? I mean, what are you hearing in the bubble, I guess, or, to the extent that you're outside of it at all? What are you hearing about this upcoming election and where people's heads are? I mean, we look at the polls and it looks like Trump's running away with this, but is that the sense where you are? Do you feel like that's a done deal?
Look, I'll kick it off. I know everybody's got their individual thoughts on all of this. My sense is that all elections and politics in general these days are pretty dynamic. Now, if you look at the polls and you were looking at polls for a period of time, you would say they look pretty static to me. It looks like Donald Trump has got a massive lead, and it doesn't matter if you are indicted or what the news cycle looks like it only expands. I think the state-based stuff gets a little different, and if you look at Iowa, New Hampshire, some of the spending that's going on and some of the names that are sort of rising and falling, the discrepancy between the top of the ticket and the rest of the ticket is not quite as much as it is in a national poll. I think that's something to watch as you get into particularly this debate, which is kind of the first time you get everybody on the stage at the same time making their case. I mean, unless you're a political junkie, you haven't listened to like Ron DeSantis's pitch or Nikki Haley's pitch or Mike Pence. You just haven't done it. You know that Donald Trump's in the front page of your newspaper every day. And you may believe that what's been done to him is egregiously wrong, and you may have some sort of adhesion to the top of the ticket as a result of that. But I don't think we're into the argument yet. And that's, look, to take from your question at the outset, we take a lot of pride in having pretty strong roots in where we came from, right? None of us were actually a part of politics, sort of the furthest thing from silver spooners. Didn't have a mom or dad that got us an internship here, and had to try to work our way up. And as a consequence, we had a little different perspective than an awful lot of people who were in Washington from day one and got the internship and sort of worked through the bubble of Washington, D.C. And we stay connected to our hometowns. And so I think it's a different perspective that we have than maybe a lot of people here.
I think what Holmes just said is extremely critical. I think that is one thing that all of us have in common is none of us were silver spooners. We're all products of self-made hard work that went into getting us here. And I think that is what provides a lot of perspective, especially in today's Republican Party, in the more populist conservative movement that's currently in vogue, is you've had a shift where it's more like the left is this, generational elite party, where they're not even willing to let the baton be passed. Biden's been in power now for how many years? Before anyone here was born.
Yeah.
However,
Right.
we can, the perspective that we bring is informed from that. When we go out and did a show in Holmes's hometown, and you see where he came from, and you see his friends from back then, he's a Minneapolis guy. Shockingly, he's not a DC guy. He may dress like one, but he's a Minneapolis guy.
He definitely dresses the most. I think he's the most put together of all of us,
I have a reputation to uphold.
I understand.
And I don't like looking like I'm not put together, Michael.
I appreciate it. You're not an internet guy like me. Like, I'm lucky to just be wearing pants
I
every
was
day.
just going to say, the fact that you're out of sweatpants today is terrific.
Yeah.
I salute you. You have a lot of respect for the chicks on the road.
I do. I mean, I think when we...
So
when
you guys
we
don't want to
dis-
see my PJ bottoms? Is that what you're saying?
There we go.
We're like business. We're business from here up. We're like a mullet, basically.
What kind of
the way
show?
that we
What
dress,
kind of
you know
show
what I mean?
is this? What's going on here?
It's not Chicks of the Night. Not that at all.
Yeah, but I look.
That's
I
a
think
whole
when we
different
start,
program, honestly.
It is.
It's more of a pay-to-play operation.
Right.
when we started this show, I think we all had in mind our buddies back home, and I love that people in DC like to listen to the show and everything. And I think we provide a unique insight and stuff that's happening on Capitol Hill and all of that sort of stuff. But I think every time we do a show, I'm thinking about my buddies back in Indiana and whether this content and the stories we're covering are accessible to them in the way that they consume politics. And nobody just sits down for a lunch or they're at the water cooler and they're only talking about politics or they want to be lectured to, right? If they talk about politics, they're talking about that 40% of the time, and they're talking about sports, they're talking about culture, they're talking about movies, they're talking about all this sort of stuff. So I think we try to make our show approachable from that lens of how do normal people actually consume politics? I got family in Florida and in Texas and Indiana, and when I talk to them, they're only kind of sort of paying attention to this Republican primary at this point. And these are people who definitely consume a lot of political news, but I think what people are seeing in the polling is the response bias of people who pick up the phone and talk to a pollster for 20 minutes and say, yes, I'm definitely voting for this person, right? And I think just based on my conversations with family across the country, everybody is much more open for business.
It's much more dynamic.
Than the polls would suggest. And even if you look at some of the polls, Donald Trump's at 45%, but you look at the crosstabs in those polls, half the people that are saying they're supporting Donald Trump today are open to other candidates. And like you would never really know that from reading just headlines, you know?
Yeah. No, talking to family and friends is the best way I've found to stay grounded in all kinds of politics, but particularly this presidential election. And I mean, I'm also from the Midwest, like these guys.
He can't, literally, the thing you need to know about Smash is that he actually cannot complete a sentence without linking it back to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
It is impossible. You can't, it is literally, just wait, you'll hear it.
Guy loves his town. Proud of his town.
Honestly,
It's a rare thing these days.
the truth is, it's because Brooks the only DC guy here. He's friends with journos.
Yeah, that's
tries to act like he's got his Midwest roots.
Yeah.
So overcompensating.
What I've found is that you really cannot get a good understanding of what's happening in politics by talking to people in D.C. You just fundamentally can't. And you were asking about the presidential race, and what I've heard from a lot of my family and a lot of my friends is that people are open-minded, like Michael says. They want to they still like Trump. They still want to stick up for Trump, but they want to win. And so they're not ready to like completely turn away from Trump. You know, they like the things that he did. This is probably like what you guys hear on a daily basis, but they also want to win, and they don't want another 4 years of Joe Biden. So it's a conflict that they are wrestling with on a routine basis, and the mainstream media will never capture that.
Yeah. We have a lot of diehards though. I mean, you'd be surprised. Like we have we have like the real folks out here in our audience, but a lot of the diehard Trump people, what we're struggling with, I think, audience wise, is we're trying to get a gauge as to whether or not those folks will be never Bideners, if that makes sense. Like we want to make sure that when push comes to shove, they will vote for whoever it is that is on our ticket, and it's not going to be Biden. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you got to look at that
at
both,
this point.
too. I mean, I think my
Right.
sense is both sides of the party, we have equal concern. Now, generally speaking, this thing works its way back together because a great equalizer and consolidator is always the Democratic Party and their willingness to do absolutely insane things that drive people through the moon with woke culture and everything else. So, I think we're going to get there, but there is a chasm, no question about it, that we may not have seen since like H.W. Bush and Bob Dole. Right? Where you just have two sort of competing visions that are not working together hand in hand, and then they're just going to run this thing all the way through. And I don't know that that's necessarily DeSantis and Trump. I mean, it's the field and Trump. And I think we're going to get there, but I agree with you. I think that it for us, we take time trying to explain that on like 85, on the issues themselves, I mean, other than like a handful of things, everybody agrees on almost everything.
Right.
Exactly.
So what we try to suss out, and I'm sure you guys do a lot of this too, is why is it that you are where you are? And, for an awful lot of Trump supporters, that 30% sort of what it feels like a basement, that he can't go below that. I'm not sure that there's a ton of issues in them of themselves that have consolidated that support. I think they just love Donald Trump. And that is fair, and that is
exactly
that is how you build a movement, and that's what a base looks like. I mean, it doesn't almost matter what it is that the issues are. For the rest of the field, there are issues that sort of help consolidate. For people who are very, very concerned about the advancement of woke culture and corporations and schools and things like that, I mean, DeSantis has historically had a big lead with that crew. And there's different candidates have different pitches. I think at some point, everybody will get back together here. We're not there yet. We got a lot of road to go.
Yeah, I think it was roughly at this point in the previous Republican primary that we had Jeb Bush leading, and people were thinking about Scott Walker might be the next thing. So,
well, he did his best Brewster's Millions impersonation, right?
Got spend it all in one day,
like 37 mil.
And what was it? And what did they call him, Mock? Remember they called Scott Walker.
He always referred to himself as aggressively normal.
He was very normal.
And I
Way
love
too
that
normal.
because he so was. His normal
he
was
was.
aggressive.
And his track record of just kicking the hell out of unions was incredible. Like, he had a great track record.
Yeah, it was.
It's just you never know the way these things turn out.
He ran for president as a vanilla ice cream cone. There is no question about that.
Instead of like the guy on the
But I
throne
like
of skulls.
vanilla. I order vanilla ice cream. There's nothing wrong with vanilla ice cream for some of us.
You're
some
telling
of us like
on
that.
yourself. You're telling on yourself.
It's okay. It's all right.
Are you guys all on the same page when it comes to who you would like to see advance to be the nominee?
I don't think
Or
so.
do you squabble?
I don't think so.
Do you squabble about
we
that
absolutely
ever?
squabble.
Yeah.
I think
I think that's what we
Yeah.
love about, we all have very different perspectives.
Yeah.
Extremely different
Yeah.
perspectives on the show. We, that comes up and we do sort of squabble a little bit about it, which I think is, it gives a little spice.
I think
Okay,
that's
well,
the best
tell.
part.
Yeah.
You got to
honestly.
tell. Everybody go around the
Like, do you-
table and name your horse.
Oh, I don't have a horse.
Can you do that?
I don't think
you
we
don't
can.
have a horse yet.
And plus, we have made a concerted effort within, and both with our agreement with when we're talking to Ronna McDaniel and the RNC and their gracious offer to help or to allow us to host a pregame show for the debate, that we weren't going to be endorsing candidates. That would make it a little
Okay,
difficult to have
fair.
impartiality and that
So
kind
you
of thing.
can't. That's fair. Yeah.
So
that's fair.
But we also have made a commitment to our audience that we were going to have every single presidential candidate on and give them a long form half-hour interview where we ask them all kinds of different stuff. We're not going to put thumbs on the scale, and they can make the determination. Some have surprised people, right? We had Doug Burgum on the show.
Who crushed it?
Yeah.
It was an incredible. Like, I'm telling you, when more folks know about Doug Burgum, like his story of essentially, he used to be a chimney sweep who got into Stanford and started a company in North Dakota to keep kids in North Dakota working in North Dakota instead
Yeah, and
of
then
a brain drain.
then he sold to Microsoft for $1 billion, like building
Yeah,
a tech company in North Dakota.
So our oldest daughter is so incredibly pregnant right now. She's so pregnant. And it's her birthday today. Her birthday is actually today. And so we're going to celebrate this weekend. We're going to drive to Dallas. And we were like, maybe we should take her to a restaurant. But then since she's so pregnant, she's at that pregnant point where she doesn't want to be seen in public or go.
Yeah.
She just doesn't want to leave the couch. You know what I mean? She's that
completely
kind
get
of
it.
pregnant. She's there. And so I was thinking maybe I'll just get some Omaha steaks, bring the Omaha steaks to her, and we can like grill up the filet mignons or like some chicken breast or something like that. Do that on her grill and then serve her the food on the couch while
my gosh,
she's incredibly
this-
pregnant. Doesn't that sound delicious?
Yes,
With-
and she
with
would
all the
appreciate that
fixings.
so much.
Right.
And it's so odd that it is her birthday because she happens to be having her birthday smack dab in the middle of Omaha Steaks' anniversary sale.
See?
So all of you are in luck because right now they are celebrating more than 100 years of incredible steaks, and they're celebrating by offering 50% off site-wide. So, for example, they've got an anniversary package right now, which is the perfect sampling of everything that makes Omaha Steaks amazing. So it includes the 4 butcher-cut filet mignons. It includes 4 air-chilled boneless chicken breasts, 4 bacon-wrapped pork chops, 4 jumbo franks. You get the classic Omaha Steak seasoning with your order, and they throw in 8 free Omaha Steak burgers on top of that, and
Oh my
8
gosh.
free jumbo franks. It's like the greatest anniversary special package
It really
ever.
is. Unbelievable.
And you can get it by going to omahasteaks.com and then putting the word chicks in the search bar. When you do that, that package, that anniversary special package is going to pop right up and you can get 50% off. It's amazing deal right now. omahasteaks.com.
.com. So good. Yeah, I do love the business people stories. I like that aspect. And that's one of the reasons I like Vivek too.
Yeah.
I do.
I
like
think-
that.
I mean, I
like
think-
business people coming in and running for office rather than career politicians.
Vivek-
And that's one of the reasons that Trump resonated with people, right?
Totally,
That's
yeah,
why people
sure.
liked him.
I think my
Vivek
only
is from. Let me just say, Vivek is from Cincinnati.
Here we
Ohio.
go.
Another up by the bootstraps guy. He's a billionaire
I mean,
because of his hard work.
You just knew Cincinnati was coming.
Yeah.
Look, I think
And he's also resonating with young people. I have 2 older kids millennials. They really like Vivek. I don't know what you guys are hearing from the millennial folks, but that is something that is attractive to the younger demo is the fact that he is not 80 years old.
Yeah, no, I think
know?
that's key.
So,
and my
there's
feedback
that.
loop, my feedback loop on him is biased because he's from Cincinnati, and we actually have some friends in common. But I think you're right about the age thing. I think the age thing, and Michael has gone to the mat on this on the show. I'll let him talk about his his war on boomers. But but I think there's something to that. It's like, when is the torch going to pass to our generation? It's like
Right.
Gen X has just been overlooked for how long, and now it's like it's our time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It's like enough already with the old people.
well, I think the boomers would admit, but they have sort of a stranglehold on our culture, like
Here we go.
You
You
know,
wound him up.
yeah.
You could stick a quarter in his back, ladies.
Well,
Here we go.
I'm okay. Go. Let him
Shake
go.
that rake.
I'm good with it.
well,
Shake
think-
it.
I mean,
yeah.
think about this, okay? Two big before the Oppenheimer and Barbie, right? The two big summer blockbusters were another Mission Impossible movie starring Tom Cruise and another movie with Harrison Ford. And like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but those people have been around since like the 1980s. Like, and the boomers are like, yes, these stars need to be headlining more summer blockbusters. It needs to be more about when I was, 40 years younger. And like
Nothing new.
nothing new. And then think about like the two leading candidates for president. You got Joe Biden. He's technically silent generation. He's not even a baby boomer, but let's say it's of the same, era. And then, Donald Trump, baby boomer, right? And I think about the fact that like, when we elected the first baby boomer president, Bill Clinton, was 1992. And my father, who is a baby boomer, was the age I am now. My son is the age I was when we elected the first baby boomer president.
Wow.
Think about that.
Wow.
And that was 30 years ago.
Now I
30
agree with
years
Duncan.
30 years ago,
On
we
board.
elected the first baby boomer president, and the two leading candidates for president are still baby boomers 30 years later.
Wow.
And it's like these baby,
crazy,
they talk
yeah.
about like leaving a better country for the next generation. When does that start? When does that start exactly?
Can we?
You're so right.
Let's get a little.
Yeah,
Let's get a little
you're
sampling
right.
of your thoughts on Social Security.
Well,
Oh my
it's
God,
just like,
I love it.
Look, I love
it.
the baby boomers, but like, we could start passing the torch.
Yeah.
All I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's
And I know I'm
No,
going to get an
the
angry
only
call
thing-
from my
listen.
mom.
No, the only thing I'll say about that, like especially about the creative stuff, like the movies, they wouldn't be making so many Mission Impossible movies if millennials would make stuff that
Yep.
was actually decent.
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah.
start being creative. Quit remaking all of our shit.
I think, I
You know what
think
I
that's
mean?
the
Quit-
tragedy of it, is that the
Quit.
millennial generation is actually more destructive than the boomers because they take everything
Yeah.
that was sacred and wonderful,
Yes.
and then they'll be like,
redo
now
it."
this person is a
Yeah.
different race, this person's a different gender, and
Right.
they're going to be
Quit-
fighting
like,
like
don't-
capitalism or something. Like, this was a
they
Disney
keep
movie. I thought that was
redoing
like a
it.
magic fish or something in this.
Yeah, quit redoing all of our stuff. Quit like warping all of the great stuff that we did back in the 80s and 90s and like come up with your own stuff.
Yeah.
But other than that, I totally agree with everything else that you said. Yeah.
So
I'm
what do
still
you
getting
guys
through
make?
Magic Fish.
What do you guys make of DeSantis's decline in the polls? Like people are going after him so hard, and my view is personally is that I think Trump has really tainted his entire campaign, and his idolater followers are just doing to DeSantis everything that they complained was ever done to Trump in the last campaign cycles. But is it something that you think that he can recover from? And do you think that he's messaging correctly and that he needs to just stick with what he's doing, or does he need like a whole shakeup?
Yeah, let me start with the first piece of this, which is always overlooked because of all the headlines about Donald Trump. He's actually running a pretty good campaign, and he's got some really smart people that'll help to steer the ship right now. And there's little things for those of us who have been in the business for a long period of time that you look at and like they're technically very sound for the first time in any of Donald Trump's previous campaigns. Like their surrogate deployment, their endorsements to overshadow news events that other candidates are making. Like they're just technically very sound. And that includes stripping bark from Ron DeSantis for like 6-8 months and spending an enormous amount trying to define him. I do think that, look, when Ron DeSantis was in the lead in this race in January and February of this year, he had a consolidation post his big win in Florida where everybody who didn't want to just re-vote for Trump saw in him as the alternative. And that included everything
Yes.
from the base that Ron DeSantis currently enjoys, that we talked about with the woke, anti-woke crowd, to your center left, center right suburban voter who may have walked off the stage during the Trump years because they were just sort of fed up with the Republican Party. And that consolidation made for a 46% of the Republican electorate at the time. His role out of the campaign was less than perfect. Let's just say that. And coupled on top of that, a real significant offensive move from Donald Trump in his campaign, it's been a pretty precipitous decline. I will say this. In the last 10 days, I have noticed a significant rhetorical and presentation change out of Ron DeSantis that I think had he hit from the very beginning, that that the decline may not have happened. But he's sort of opening up the kimono here on everything that it is that he is talking about, why he's running, his record and everything else. And he's not afraid to go on perhaps adversarial shows and talk about it. And nobody's pulling one over on Ron DeSantis. He's pretty good at this kind of thing, and he's demonstrated that in Florida. And I think that gives him an ability to build back. Now, whether it gets back to where it was at the beginning of this year or not, I guess time will tell. But I think he's running a hell of a lot better campaign today than he was a month ago.
And also, I think, it's not just Trump's attacks. I think in January or February, when he was polling much higher, folks didn't know about, the half dozen other candidates that are in this race that are garnering support of their own.
That's right.
You got, we
Right.
mentioned Vivek, we mentioned Burgum. There's a lot of candidates who've been getting attention. So he's no longer seen as the only alternative. I would say one thing, like echoing what Josh said, is the more that they make the campaign about Governor DeSantis, the better it is for him. He's got that record of victory, winning huge in Florida. And you talk to Floridians, and I don't think I've met a single one who isn't a huge DeSantis fan. Especially during COVID,
Yeah.
they remained open, and they were very vocal about how, look, we can actually live like normal, free humans. When in many parts of the country, it was an absolute nightmare where folks weren't allowed to attend the funeral for a family member.
Yeah.
It was that dire a time. And, a lot of folks on the left are hoping everyone just completely forgets that happened. So I think that'd be one of the things that, DeSantis needs to really highlight much more is his success as a governor. Again, I still think it's just so early until you see the folks on stage, like the way that Trump caught fire in that first debate when no one, debates used to be this like boring, very formal event, and he gets up there and just punches everyone in the mouth, and folks love that. So when they all get up there and you actually see how they interact and who wants it, and the last thing is I think McCain's a great example. There's been so many of these come from behind wins in primaries where the most important step, it's almost like the hero's journey, is they have to lose everything, they have to strip down, they have to be beaten, and then they have to crawl back from that.
Americans do love a comeback story.
That's the thing, is if you can come back from adversity, that's the story of America.
Well, and you can't run against a former president of the United States without contrasting them versus you, right?
Yep.
And I think,
Right.
for the first 6 weeks of the campaign, Ron DeSantis, only kind of sort of tangentially attacked Donald Trump. And it's like, well, if you aren't going to take the guy head on, you aren't going to win because he had the job. He was president, right? And
no Trump voter is going to vote Trump light when Trump is in the race.
Right. And if
it's just not going to happen.
And if key to your argument is I'm a winner, I just won Florida by 20 points, that contrast only really works if you point out the fact that Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden, right? And if you aren't comfortable doing that, then just give up and go home, And I think over the last week, back to Holmes's point, is like he's sort of changed his rhetorical tact on this, and I think a way that is productive for his campaign. Now, no consultant in D.C. would have told Ron DeSantis to do that, because if you looked at every single poll, you'd be like, oh, well, you can't criticize Donald Trump because these voters love him and they love what he accomplished when he's president, and all of that may well be true. But if you intend on beating him in a Republican primary, you have to create the contrast that allows you to win. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
So do you think that Trump's going to show? I mean, is he going to be on
I was just
stage?
going to ask that.
It's funny you mention that
debate?
because this is actually why it's one of the reasons I really, really hope Trump does show at that debate, because he is
me too.
entertaining. He doesn't have anything to be afraid of. We all know what he can do in a debate setting, but I really want to see him go toe-to-toe with this new class of candidates. This is almost a completely different class of Republican presidential candidates than we saw when Trump first ran in 2016. He's getting a little older. He's got some record to stick up for, some record to be proud of, and I think everybody should get a chance to have their say. And just purely from a spectator perspective here, I think Republican primary voters really want to see all of them in the ring together, because even if you do like Trump, you have the confidence that he's going to be able to come out on top.
And also, I feel like he has more upside than downside. I'm sure like consultants are telling him, oh, listen, you're up in the polls. Don't rock the boat. Let's just, stay on cruise control and let's get this nomination. But if he shows up and it's like the line is still running the jungle and just wallops everybody, I think
It's
that
over.
does a lot more to
It's over.
consolidate this. And
You
end
can
it.
actually put it down.
He
at
could
that
put it
point.
away
Right.
if he just shows up and just
Well,
smacks
and he
everybody.
already did that town hall on
Don't you think it
on
could
CNN,
hurt-
I mean, like he
Don't
clearly
you
can
think it
handle
could
that.
hurt him though?
I think
Don't you
there's
think
a
it
far
could
greater
hurt him if he doesn't show up?
I think
think
there are two maxims in politics that I just have internalized. The first is you can never take a vote for granted, regardless if it's your column or not. People want you to earn their vote, regardless of where they are. And they could be just totally enamored with your candidacy. But if it ever feels like you're not really working for it, they walk away pretty damn fast. The electorate is pretty dynamic in that regard.
I agree.
And if you're Donald Trump, you do not want to give any sliver of an inclination that you think this thing is over and you're mailing it in.
I mean, Hillary didn't go to Wisconsin. She didn't show them.
I mean, that's a
attention.
perfect example, right? I mean, there's just there are
Such a great example.
it really is. And then the other maxim that I live by that I think Duncan was getting to is there's never been a Republican nominee for president ever that has run and won the nomination off of somebody else's movement. Ever. It just doesn't happen. The closest you could say was George H.W. Bush coming off of the 8 years of Ronald Reagan. But it wasn't, because he reframed everything with 1,000 points of light. And it was like a very different message than Ronald Reagan had. People do not just sort of like fixate on one thing that gave them their vote 4 years ago or 8 years ago and then apply it to other people. And that is the biggest mistake that consultants in our line of work make, is that they look at polls statically and they say, well, 70% of people believe this. That's all. That's true. But it's also a very dynamic atmosphere. When you convince people to change, you build a movement of your own. And that is actually what defines every single nominee as far back as I can remember.
Happy anniversary!
What?
It's not yours.
Oh.
It's Mike Lindell's. He's
Oh,
been
I
doing
know.
He's been doing the My Pillow thing for 20 years. Can you
Isn't
believe
that something?
I have never had a job that long. I mean, it's like, so props to him for having that company and doing the most amazing things, and making the most amazing products for 20 years.
I mean,
Can you
what
believe that?
an amazing story he has,
Right.
too. Just total, down and out, worst of times, all the way to just enormous success. And he deserves every last bit of it. And everything that My Pillow makes is so always my favorite version of that thing.
Right.
So, towels are great. You can get towels at a department store or whatever. They're fine. But then
Yep.
somehow My Pillow figures out a way to make them the very best towels ever.
Right.
Same with their
even
sheets.
dish towels. They have dish towels,
Yeah.
you guys. They have those too.
I mean, every last thing they do is just it's just heads above everybody
best.
else. And their pillow, the original pillow right now, as part of their big 20th anniversary special, their sale going on right now, is you can get the queen size My Pillows for less than $20. That's it. For a queen size pillow, less than $20. That's just part of one of the many things that is on super duper sale right now when you go to mypillow.com/chicks and then you use code chicks at checkout to get the very deepest discounts on the pillows or the towels or the sheets or whatever products that you are choosing. You're going to be so happy with them. mypillow.com/chicks. Do you want to switch
right.
gears since we've talked a lot of politics?
Yeah.
and
Sure.
fashion? You want to switch gears and talk
Yeah, a little
about
bit.
radio a little bit? You guys have probably heard the story about Don Geronimo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don Geronimo. So he's 64. Charlotte McBride is 39. So Don Geronimo is a radio. He's been a radio for a very, very long time. And obviously you guys have heard a little bit about this story. But he and his sidekick, I think his name is Crash. I don't know his real name. I'm sure his parents didn't name him Crash. But they were at the commander's training camp and they said a few things about Charla, not knowing. I'm assuming they didn't really know who she was. But since she is a very beautiful woman and she does resemble Barbie, I mean, she has the look that kind of looks like Barbie. He made some comments and he said, I thought she was a cheerleader. He referred to her as being, Barbie. And they were both fired for those comments. And Mock and I did a whole podcast on this about a week ago. And we both disagree with it. I mean, just wholeheartedly agree with the fact that both these guys were fired. I think one of the reasons we agree with it is because we're of the generation where we just don't get offended by much.
Right.
But also, we both worked in radio for, almost a decade. And we worked with all dudes. And so we look at this and we're like, God, we could have gotten all these guys fired for so many things that they said to us. You know what I mean? Because it was just a playful, fun, frat-like environment that we really enjoyed it. Because they were like they were our brothers. It was like working with a bunch of brothers. But also, I mean, if Mock said this in our podcast because I don't look a thing like Barbie, but she could probably pass more for Barbie.
Don't think
but
so.
if some dude came up to her and said, "You look like Barbie," or "I thought you were a cheerleader," both of us would take that as a compliment.
Oh my God, I would
right.
be like
It's like
falling
we
all
wouldn't-
over myself with glee. I would be like, oh my God, thank
no matter-
you. That's so nice.
I wouldn't be like, this is the thing. And we're both educated, I feel like accomplished women. And I wouldn't be like, I just wouldn't be offended by that at all. But so many women are offended by this stuff. And the fact that she is okay with this guy or both these guys getting fired from their jobs for this stuff. Just women are so okay with the cancel culture. I'm just curious. You guys are younger than us. And so I'm just curious what your take is on this whole debacle, all these shenanigans, if you will.
I mean, look, I think it's an indictment of our culture in a lot of ways, and that we've become victims and everybody feels like the only recourse they have is to be victimized by something. I'm not saying that this woman wasn't offended. She may very well have been offended, but I think, in generations past in this country, when you're offended by something like that, she's also an incredibly accomplished professional. And if you've got two dudes out there saying something that's offending you, I think in generations past, certainly you two would have done this. You walk up to their radio show and you intimidate the hell out of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The old geriatric bastards. You don't know anything about what you're talking about. And it's nice of you to appreciate something
We
good.
actually said that.
Yeah,
Yep.
offend them right back.
Right.
Right.
We said we would have challenged them to some sort of a, like a
Like
I
a
don't know,
banter
not a
duel.
radio. Exactly. It would have been something where we could have elevated our show by going back and forth with those guys. It would have been like, yeah, okay, well, let's go back and forth with them for a little bit. But yes, she just didn't do that. She did play the victim, which makes all women look bad,
And weak.
They're just it's like
Yeah,
there's
and
an
weak.
absolute loss of forbearance and just trying to understand each other. And the first instinct in our society has now become, how do I take away this person's livelihood if I feel they've wronged me?
Yeah,
Like
it's
the
true.
knee-jerk
Exactly.
reaction to just make sure someone will worry about how they're going to pay rent or mortgage or feed their family is the first action you decide to take, instead of maybe pulling them over and saying, that was kind of a jerk thing to say. That actually has more of an impact on a person, I would say, than, their reaction from losing their livelihood becomes like, well, I hate this person now. The problem hasn't been solved.
Yeah.
You've just made someone extremely bitter and hardened.
And what does it teach people about, like, basically the message that it sends is you have no agency whatsoever, right? That you are just sort of walking this earth, and anything that happens to you, you can cry foul, and the imaginary referee comes in and lays penalties on the opposition. You imagine teaching your kids that, right?
Yeah.
That life's not hard.
Yeah.
That if somebody comes at you and offends you or tries to do something to you to hurt your livelihood and what you're trying to do for a living, the only thing you can do is throw up your hands and ask for somebody's, third party intermediary to help you out. Like, granted, there are horrible stories that we've had over the years of people actually being sexually harassed and actually, having
Right.
horrible workplaces that all of us completely agree need to be addressed immediately. But this kind of thing is an offense. You're offended. If she was offended, like you said, you probably wouldn't be offended. None of the women in my life would have been offended by something like that. But I understand that there's some people who would take offense to that.
Some people would, yeah.
Some people would.
Right.
And the idea that she doesn't have any agency of her own to address that, I think is a really shitty thing to tell young women who are trying to be professionals, who are trying to get to a point where they're that guy's boss, right? And if someday in the next Don Geronimo 30 years from now, his boss looks a lot like Barbie instead of whoever his boss is now, my sense is he probably has a very different way of handling that kind of thing. And like that's how you make societal change. It's not by just like blowing the whistle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, fellas, if you could let our audience know more about this upcoming debate night preview that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal. I mean, I still can't believe it's happening. It was incredibly generous. We had Rana on our show, and on the spot, she's like, well, why don't you guys do like a game day pregame for the debate? So, I mean, you know, if that's what she wanted, she may regret it, but we're going to do our best.
She may deeply regret it. I mean, for those in your audience who aren't familiar, College Game Day is a famous ESPN show that they do before college football games, where they have a big desk in front of a crowd in front of the stadium of the week, game of the week. And
we're big SEC girls here.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you know exactly. I mean, literally, they camp out in SEC territory. But what this is like a first of its kind in politics, where you use the energy and the interest in a younger generation to help amplify the event a little bit. And you have some fun. And it's not going to be like four dudes up with like the third tier surrogate of each campaign being like, well, what does the governor need to do tonight? You know, I mean, we're going to be having fun. And we're going to be telling jokes, and we're going to be doing a little analysis, but more than anything, we're going to try to get people really into it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's going to be it's the official pregame show for the debate. There's going to be a massive crowd behind us. The logistics are getting finalized, but it should really just be a massive party.
That's what the goal is.
Celebrating that the time has come
That's
to get rid of
awesome.
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
Yes.
And where is it going to be live? Where are you guys going to be?
So it'll be on Rumble. We'll be right outside
Okay.
of the venue in Milwaukee. So just steps.
They'll be right
steps
there.
from the
Okay.
front. Yeah, steps from the front door going into the debate, and people who are
Okay.
going into the debate are going to be behind us with signs and everything. And
How
we'll be out.
fun!
It's gonna be
It's
amazing.
it is going to be
That'll be
amazing.
so fun, you guys.
And I mean, there's so much stuffy coverage of politics, and everybody is kind of like comes at this from a background of being a nerd who was their lunch money was taken from them every day, and they lived in a locker in high school. And what we're trying to do is bring this into normal people culture,
Yes.
where it's like a little bit more like the
Right.
regular types in your high
Like their
school.
discussion of politics is all like a vindictive revenge on their childhood.
Exactly. And if
you know what? we I was just going to say, we have been talking about culture, and it just bravo to the RNC for doing this,
Yeah,
because
agreed.
we've been talking about culture and politics literally for 14 years since we started this.
that's huge.
And so the fact that they did this and they engaged you guys to do this that night is just such a fantastic, it's just a win for
Yeah.
them. It's a total win for us. It's a win for conservatism. So bravo to them for doing this,
we-
and bravo to y'all.
We
That's
appreciate
awesome.
it. Thanks for the kind words. You guys have been a big part of that revolutionary change and looking at politics in a little different, little lighter side. where you
Very
can bring some
necessary
humor.
change.
Yeah,
Very
and it's
necessary.
just there's not a lot of us out there, so it's nice. It's nice to stick together.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you being on with us today. So looking forward to just continued appearances on each other's programs. Because you guys are a blast. And it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for your
Thank
time.
you
so much.
guys.
Absolutely.